All right, guys. Well, so here we are in my office. You might hear a little resonating, like echo in here, but we're in a quiet spot of pure muscle and fitness. I'm with my skeleton. Okay, this is an old guy, and he's been a little beat up. You can see, kind of unfortunately, where normal posture would be and what he's dealt with. So, unfortunately, yeah, our skeletons are all available to be moved until they're not, right? And so this little guy has been moved quite a bit. And I've got a lot of questions from a lot of people over the years about shoulder scapular dyskinesis, scapular tipping, scapular winging, and how obviously that's affecting most of their workouts, or that's creating weird posture or weird development. And I thought I would today spend a little bit of time going over some stuff before we talk about exercise, because coming up in videos coming up next would probably be things like back workouts and chest workouts, which everybody seems to want. But if we don't solve shoulder blade problems, then and how they move on a rib cage, then lo and behold, we're going to show up with some other problems when we decide to load chest, or we try to move our shoulders to create back issues. So first things first, shoulder dyskinesis. You know, when they want to really scare you, they start using Greek words. But all that means is the scapula, right? Scapula is not moving very well. So scapular dyskinesis means just bad motion relative to the scapula. That can be caused by a lot of things, but typically in the athletic world, overuse. In the bodybuilding world, probably some really bad choices in terms of how we try and fixate our shoulder blades, and then unfortunately are left with other options. If you don't move the scapula, the rib cage tries to figure out how to help you. Okay, now when we think about scapular tipping, that just means this lower edge has decided to start to fall away. And some of the scapular muscles up here start to hold really hard to try and help. But this would obviously create all kinds of challenge for how our shoulder blades move, or how our arm is going to move on our shoulder blade if this starts to fan away. If you took this whole thing off, which I have and I will not do now because that's how he gets broken, okay? But if you saw a scapula, you would see something that's trying to marry to the shape of the rib cage. And the only place the shoulder blades kind of can fit for most of us, this poor little guy, is probably about 30 degrees or even 45 degrees for this little guy forward. That means our scapular plane, the plane of the scapula, is actually moving on him quite a bit. For him to be outside would be for him to move almost forward, okay? If you told him to be back here at 0 degrees, right? If that's 20, 30, 40, whatever, if you're telling him to be narrow or be flat to the world, you've actually asked him to compress this back corner pretty bad, okay? He does not fit. And when we get into proportionality, you can kind of see that everybody's built the same, and then nobody's built the same, okay? This skeleton is probably a 14-year-old Chinese boy, believe it or not, okay, relative to where all these skeletons have been made. Thank you, China. But if you look at the size just of rib cages alone, okay, we're not built the same. If you look at the amount of space he has between his lowest rib and his pelvis, and then you look at mine, and I have about 1 finger between my lowest rib and there. One of us is going to look like they can side bend better than the other, right? One of us is going to look like we bounce into some stuff, right? If we looked even front to back, God help him, right? Front to back, my rib cage is definitely a different size than this guy, okay? If we looked at sizes of pelvis, oh my gosh, from the front of that point to the front of this point, I'm about a 1.5 at least bigger than this guy. So when we say everybody can do ballet and everybody can power lift, I would say, yep, there are born people built for powerlifting. There are born people built for basketball. There are born people that are built for things like ballet as well. It doesn't mean we can't all do it, but there are natural born people that Olympic lift that thrive under that scenario, and just trying to duplicate what they do is not a bad deal for you. We just never be world class, okay? It's never be easy for us, right? And so what we have to figure out is, how do we move our parts so that we don't try and imitate them to the point of, if they can do it, I'm going to do it. I've gone to Cirque du Soleil, and the funny part is there are no animals there, so everything there is humanly possible, right? But if we turn around and say, wait, by those humans, not necessarily these humans. If I walk out on the basketball court and say, I'm just going to try really hard, I'll be Michael Jordan, Michael Jordan would come up and tell me, no, you're not, right? Lots of people would be happy to tell me, no, I'm not. So if we start thinking about how our scapula move, sometimes there's variation here that we don't realize, okay? We don't take x-rays of your scapula and say, wow, you know what, you can go behind the neck, right? But we see really big, strong individuals that have some amazing, unbelievable, despite their size, amazing ability to go behind the neck and do presses. And we think that's how they got big. They just have availability to do that, okay? Most of us do not have a scapula that's pinned way back here or have the ability to get there. Sometimes you'll see people impose something like a, oh my gosh, what are they called? Wall angels. Wall angels, right? And say, look, I can do it. And your therapist will show you, look how good I am. And I can do it, so therefore you should. Well, if we start looking even at sizes of rib cages and orientations of scapula, there's some people that are orientated forward in neutral, and they're never going to get behind them. Some people are going to be like almost 10 degrees. This guy's sitting there at a rib cage angle that is almost like 20 to 30 degrees forward. If you said normal is behind you, he would be the first person to tell you, I can't reach that. And if somebody told you, hey, that's dysfunctional, then you should be able to do that. Look what I can do. Then this would be where we start seeing what Michael Jordan can do, the rest of us can't always do. Okay, what the Cirque du Soleil athlete can do. Yes, they are amazing, but I just can't try that. Okay, so some of our dyskinesis, how we move, is imposed because people don't realize they have to keep trying to change their entire body to fit something that someone else said, I can do it, so why can't you? Or you saw something on TikTok or whatever, and you decided, hey, that looks really cool, I'm gonna try it. Let's try behind the neck chin-ups just for giggles, right? And sure enough, wow, I just blew up the front of my shoulder, okay, right? And so this is where we start to say, hey, can you fit the equipment? Can you fit the arcs of the equipment? Do you feel what you're supposed to train? And then generally, do you have to keep trying to work so hard for somehow for your shoulder blades to get in the plane of the exercise? I would argue that this strategy, right, this orientation strategy to get your shoulders in plane is a mistake. Okay, I might think, hey, I just got to change the range I use this in. I don't actually need to let go of my rib cage. Otherwise, I start causing dyskinesis. Does that make sense? Okay, and so tipping, this thing fanning away, is a dysfunction of muscles. Winging, where these things actually come off, and unfortunately this poor skeleton has a pin here, I cannot demonstrate that, would mean that this shoulder blade has popped off. One of these is a lot harder to deal with than the other. If you see scapular winging, these guys fanning out, it means you have a whole host of things that could have happened from trauma, okay, potentially nerve impingement type stuff on neck, could be falls and impacts to the neck and spine that have created some disconnection here, and the scapula is just doing what it can to hold on. There's nothing happening here in your body that it's trying to hurt you until you start imposing things. When you start imposing things, that's when you start seeing some other things have to pay the price. Okay, so I'm a big fan of letting your shoulder blades move. I'm a big fan of letting your scapula move. If we start thinking either simply something like a shoulder press, one of the things that I hate to see is a lot of people talking about don't let your traps be involved. Well, when you choose to keep, this is pretty much a normal angle for this trap, okay, for this to sit. So this is a slightly upward, outward position. If I bring my arm up to 90 degrees without this moving, on this little skeleton, I've got some space, right? Keeping in mind this little dead guy anatomy. But as I start to go up, at some point, this is supposed to slide. And what you're seeing here is my bicep tendon potentially running into something. What your body's built to do is there's a ligament right across this little space, okay? That says, hey, when you hit me, get out of the way, okay? This little ligament that runs across here, when it feels any kind of tension of this popping in, is built to let the scapula move. Okay, now if you look down, this would look like a golf ball sitting on a tee pushing up. That means all the rotator cuff compressing here properly needs the shoulder blade to be a mobile anchor. And if you see a mobile anchor not moving because you chose to hold it down, you've introduced a tremendous amount of either force at the top or, unfortunately, shearing at the bottom. Okay, this is where we blow out the labrum on the bottom. Okay, and everybody says, oh, it's that bench press that you keep doing and that you're hurting yourself in the gym lifting heavy weights. It's like, well, no, this is built to push, almost like this pushing up through the humerus. As soon as this comes around, you would see the shoulder blade pop out the side for that kind of press. You'd also see the collarbone get out of the way. If you've chosen to use your traps properly and use your scapular upward rotators, this is going to get out of the way for you to press up to 180 degrees. Okay, in a previous video, I covered something with Robin. We did a scapular motion called a waiter's carry. And if you see something going all the way up there, you would see somebody's shoulder blade come around the rib cage, right, to get under my arm. If you see something over here, I can tell you I'll start feeling some nervy things here if I had a load where my shoulder blade hasn't moved. If my collarbone is here, trust me, my collarbone would have to get up to this 180. That means upper pec, scapular motions have to come up. My shoulder blade literally has to actually get up under my arm. Okay, this is a misunderstood thing that I see when somebody says, hey, don't move your shoulder blades, is that they're asking this to move. And depending on how much he's built, I might have maybe above 90, for some people, maybe above to even as high as 120 without the scapula moving. But I would argue that most of us don't, okay? And you won't know until you try it and bang into something. I treat a lot of bodybuilders with some shoulder impingement dysfunction, elbow dysfunction. Again, these are all things that could be avoided, in my opinion, if they let their scapula actually get out of the way. Okay, if you think of this shoulder blade as pushing, all of a sudden that shoulder blade is pushing the humerus away, well, that motion looks like it kind of moves pretty normally. If you decide to lift this up, because this doesn't move, yeah, depending on what you got, there's going to be some potential. And if you add pinning it backwards, well, now you've added a whole bunch of different things that potentially set you up for a lot of problems, okay? Now, I get a lot of questions also around this same dyskinesis around rib cage and orientation. Once again, if you don't bother to train your obliques and your abs and your trunk muscles, okay, that's another set of problems. But if you look at these top 7 ribs, they move in what's called a pump handle action, okay, like an old-fashioned water pump. So if I could lift up his skeleton, you'd hear him going, right? You'd be breathing, but that's because there's a sternum. But these bottom 5 ribs, okay, they move in a completely different direction. They move in and out, okay? So that means if I was going to try and help this guy pull his diaphragm down, he would decide to have to make this rib cage bigger. If this is dysfunctional, meaning I don't train it, I don't have control of it, I don't even know to stop it from flaring out, then I'm left with this as my only option, okay? Lots of bodybuilders come in with, man, my neck, my scalenes, my SCM is so tight. But what you're seeing is the rib cage is going to the neck. The rib, because if I did this normally, said, hey, we go this way. When you see somebody walk in the gym like that, you might think there's something really odd going on with that guy. But if you see this, you'd be like, oh, that's a bodybuilder. Okay, you would see this, right? When you see that rib cage coming up to the neck, and then they go, I don't know why my neck is really so tight. It must be because I'm so big. And what you might see is huge traps here. Say, oh, dude, Josh trains his traps too much. At the end of the day, the shoulder blades are trying to figure out, this trap is trying to figure out how the heck do I help this posture? When the reality is, this is not about down, okay? This is more about in, okay? This direction, okay, of trying to hold your ribcage down is not exactly what I'm really advocating. I'm mostly saying, hey, this skeleton can actually have a ribcage angle right here that is much less than 90 degrees. I see bodybuilders coming in at 150 plus, okay? When they lay down and you see your ribcage fan open, almost like an angle like that, that is a dysfunction, okay? That is something that creates apneas and breathing issues and all kinds of headaches and all kinds of stuff. So what we're going to try and talk about today are some of the muscles and some of the orientations that you might have to work on, whether that's breathing exercises, whether that's understanding pelvis positioning. This curve right here and this curve are completely dependent and actually responsive to each other. These are pro-extended positions, so this guy can calm down. But if this guy is flexed and this guy is flexed, this gets bigger and bigger and bigger. This curve gets wider. This will get deeper, and you'll see more and more of this type of thing. Now, most people argue like a forward neck posture, just fix your neck. Okay, I've had an issue with a bunch of people. I don't know what they see in physio chiro, and yes, I'm picking on one kind of disconnected thing here. But when your neck is forward and they tell you to pull it back, what they're telling you to do is flex your neck in extension. Okay, I would tell you that this is a problem from way down here. Okay, I would tell you doing these does not necessarily solve a forward head position. This forward head position is here for a reason. because the pelvis and rib cage are so far back. Okay, I would solve this problem lower, and I would start looking at breathing stuff that actually starts to compress, and lo and behold, you will see the neck come right back up on top of the body because you gave it more and more help down below. Okay, the head is the last thing that's going to basically stop, right, from trying to stay on your feet. If your rib cage is out of control or you don't even think of it, guess what? Your neck is going to be the thing that's trying to figure out, how do I get something out in front of me? Okay, now if we're talking about some exercises, super simple ones, okay, some of the things I've seen, the way most people teach a plank. Okay, so if we had a scapular dyskinesis, most people teach a plank in a triangle. Okay, and if you looked at the World Guinness Book of World Records, the guy and girl that are in there are in this position. Now, I'm not taking anything away from why somebody spends 23 hours or whatever the hell they did in a plank. Okay, funny enough, but I watched the girl do it, and I could actually see her shoulder blades literally fan straight out. Now, what they do when they say, planks are too easy, planks too easy, I need a ball, I need a this or that. What I'm saying is you've put yourself in a position to kind of go with what the body wants to do. How can I survive this? How do I make this the easiest possible? And so the position they're in is the easiest possible position. If you want to last longer in a plank, by all means, put all your pressure on your elbows and hang out in a plank. But what you will see is sort of this scapular position, wing out. Okay, you'll see winging and or tipping for sure. And that's not what we're actually asking for. We're asking for the shoulder blades to actually fan onto the rib cage. And guess what? That means pushing on your whole forearm, and that's in a position of not internal, but external rotation, okay? So if I got on this table, hopefully it's long enough for me, and I think from just my elbows, you can see my shoulder blades pop out right away. If I stay from a triangle, yep, same thing. My shoulder blades pop out, really easy. I'm staying because I'm a little too long for this. I'm on my knees, okay? But if I turn around and I make a square box here, and I actually move on top of this, and I start to push my shoulder blades, right? I start to fit my shoulder blades. As I push down on my forearms, my rib cage and shoulder blades have something. As I start to drop myself down, I can actually get them retracted with all that pressure. And lo and behold, instead of being a flat back position, I'm going to ask you to be just in a neutral here. As you start to support your neutral, that's your obliques having to do something. And all of a sudden, oh, wait a minute. Well, I can feel my serratus do something, right? As you get longer, oh, do I have enough room? As I get longer, okay, that's more weight for me to have to deal with. And lo and behold, yeah, this becomes a real exercise. But I'm pushing my forearms down through the bed to hold this. And lo and behold, I feel some serratus and obliques have to do their job. This is not about abs is defined as rectus, okay? This is abs defined as trunk, okay? If you have to include your shoulders, and I've done some exercise before, I think my very first video was on the captain's chair, and lo and behold, what did I tell you? You have to push down on that whole forearm. What do people do? Hang out on their elbows. What would that do to the challenge to my serratus? Oh, my shoulder blades would reorient and just pin up on top. You'd probably see some tipping. If I had to push, you're going to see my shoulder blades have to actually engage, and all of a sudden, oh, you asked me to have that surface and that surface attached. Okay, give that a try, guys. That's the first thing we're going to even try and figure out. I see an awful lot of questions about shoulder reaching, wall reaching. I've seen people that come to me and say, man, my lower back hurts, but I'm getting so much better and my wall reaches. And then I see this. Oh, and I'm like, oh, you're reaching so high. And I'm like, but my back hurts. I'm like, well, you didn't get above 90 degrees. They're like, no, I did. I got up there. I'm like, no, you didn't. You changed your spine. And so this is something the body is doing. Now here's the problem. If my hand is built to find a surface shape, my shoulder blade is also built to mirror and max that too. So if all of a sudden it's saying, I'm matching whatever you're asking, and you do a flat thing, it tries to kind of maintain a flat thing. And those people that have tipping, winging, unfortunately, dyskinesis, what are they going to do? They're going to create some like, oh, I can't go any higher. I feel that, oh, I feel my pinching. The reality is this would be easier to say, I want you to push something up, right? That looks like the kettlebell people might be okay there, pushing up. But if we want to get this to shoulder press, funny enough, I actually choose to do this a little differently. If you found a corner, here I am married to the wall, okay? And all of a sudden now, as soon as my shoulder blades have something else. Well, now protraction means kind of going that way. I have 45 degrees to reach and grab, and I'm trying to use my shoulder blade to reach out as far as I can, all the way up to as high as I can go. So if I did both of these together, or maybe separate, you're gonna see my shoulder blade and spine decide to reach for something. Okay, and again, I fall back to any type of reaching based athlete seems to be able to do this better than most of us because they don't even think twice about reaching, right? I watched some guy, testing out a new axe on YouTube. And sure enough, I watched him use an axe in a completely different way than I tend to use an axe, right? And sure enough, yeah, his shoulders look big, his back looks big, his chest looks big. And he says, wow, that was like a lot more work than I thought. And he's gotten wider and wider with every swing. There's a reason why you go into some of the CrossFit gyms and some of the people go, there's a bunch of sledgehammers and a bunch of tires. What are you training? I don't know, but I love it. I don't know. I feel great after I do it. What you're seeing is them actually swing with their shoulders and have to use more and more of their torso, more and more of their trunk to reach, whether we're throwing axes, whether we're swinging hammers, right? Even digging and raking is literally a bunch of shoulder-based things, okay? So if you're gonna come to a wall, one of the things that I might see, again, is this. As my arms go up, what might you see? My rib cage is trying to figure out how to reorient for me, how to lift my arms. At the end of the day, what if I said pushing on this, and if I go up on the ball of my feet, well now my rib cage is built to go backwards while I reach over this, almost creating like a piking position. Okay, those of you that might have played volleyball or basketball, we'd be dunking over somebody right now. We'd be reaching up and pressing a block. At the end of the day, super easy, but something that no longer becomes, if you think of a climbing athletes have some crazy looking shoulders, right? But you think it's all grip strength. It's shoulder strength. They're using their torsos and trunk to reach and grab stuff, right? If you see people that do like flags, and you see all these sort of dragon flag positions, you're seeing a huge amount of shoulder function that is woven into oblique function. They're not just using their abs to lift things up. They're using their shoulders to actually create platforms to then move their legs, right? And so this is another easy thing. Find 45 degrees, find a wall, find a corner of a wall, and actually start to move your shoulder blades, not just your hands, and feel this connection out here is this shoulder blade moving here. Okay, give it a try, guys. Super easy to fix. All right, so questions. I'm a bodybuilder. Why should I care about this stuff? As a therapist, I treat lots of bodybuilders for what I find are just overuse injuries, okay? Overzealous type stuff or focused on just moving weight, right? Okay, why should I give a shit about this stuff? What I would say is that some of the biggest and best bodybuilders, once you get there, want to stay there, right? And one of the bigger problems is if you start creating shortcuts all the way up, it's very hard to start to retool this stuff as you go back down. Because once you start seeing injuries, it's like, oh my gosh, I've been doing something wrong for a long time. Okay, so this is an investment. This probably looks like a warm-up for most people. It's not a workout, but it is an understanding of, hey, am I even really able to move my shoulders? I get a question about, is mobility work necessary, right? And what I would say, this fits in the mobility work category. And I would probably think that if you don't have that range of motion mobility, it's very important you know that you don't, okay, right? Because you might not be built for some of these positions. And if you don't do mobility work, not to gain more, just even to metric, how much do I have? If your shoulders aren't gonna go higher than this, why would I ever do chin-ups? Because my body weight will definitely take me to a position that might feel like I'm creating some problems with my arms. Okay, I will feel impingement and issues. And someone says, I thought chin-ups were the best exercise. I'm like, well, if you don't have 180 degrees, then hanging abs and chin-ups and things like this from this position are going to be something we need to avoid. Okay, so mobility work can be investment, it can be investigation. Okay, and then some days, unfortunately, you're not the same. At the end of the day, I had a question about somebody else that said that one of these guys he knows does a lot of mobility work and he does a lot of fixing in terms of his own body. And the question was, well, if he knows so much, how come he has to do so much fixing? That's the reality, is our bodies are not some robot that you can keep saying, oh, what I had yesterday, I have today. This is why we investigate, what do I have? How good I feel? No matter what your split is, chances are you might not have the same range of motion. Wouldn't it be important to know that before you start your workout, right? Some bodybuilders, unfortunately, will say, 400 pounds will fix my range of motion problems. You'll be like, yeah, pretty sure you're going to get forced, right? Enough weight is going to force you into position, but you might feel the wear and tear in a completely different place. And then that's usually how we kind of can avoid some silly injuries. Usually I'm on the floor, but this is nice and quiet in here. And I can probably have a nap. So here's the deal. Most people are teaching a bridge, right? Or a hip thrust here. And I don't really care. The point for our shoulders is that if you are pushing, regardless of what you do down here on your heels or wide or whatever, but you don't do anything with your shoulders, you are doing a neck bridge. You are driving yourself into neck flexion here. So if I thought of the shoulder blades and the shoulders, they move in an arc this way. My hips move in an arc this way, right? So if I'm driving to get under the bed, my shoulders are driving to get under the bed too, but they're actually driving wider, okay? And funny enough, I see so many people trying to drive stuff through their rib cage by depressing here, somehow thinking that way, right? Driving down. At the end of the day, I can actually get my shoulder blades, my collarbone can get a little more range if it goes up over my rib cage. So this would be almost upward, meaning towards my head, right? As my shoulders get behind me, you can see my rib cage goes forward while I drive, no matter what I'm talking about down below. But my shoulders are trying to get around. They move in this arc, right? Because there's one place your shoulder blade at the entire shoulder girdle attaches is right here to your sternum. Okay, so it has to move from the sternum. It has to move from this SC joint right here, the sternum-clavicular joint. So that means we're actually trying to get over the rib cage to get behind us. And all of a sudden, all the spinal stuff lines up based on the fact that you used your shoulders properly. Okay, give it a try, guys.